Welcome to True.
The Women's in the Shadow, a full documentary. Narrator, Vo. In the final days of the Third Reich, as Berlin burned and the world held its breath, the lives of several women hung in the balance. These were not the architects of evil, but they stood close enough to feel its heat. This is their story. What happened after the fall? Segment 1. Eva Braun, the Devoted One. Reconstruction, the Führer Bunker, April 30th, 1945. Narrator, Eva Braun, the woman who became Hitler's wife for less than 40 hours, chose to die beside him in that concrete tomb beneath the Reich Chancellery. But what if she had survived? What if, in those final moments, she had changed her mind? Dramatic reenactment, Eva in the bunker. Eva, actress, haunted. I've wasted my life waiting in the shadows. Photographer, mistress, nothing more. And now, even this choice, this final act, is his, not mine. Historian Dr. Margaret Fisher, interview. Eva Braun represents perhaps the most tragic figure in this narrative. She was intelligent, artistic, athletic, yet she reduced herself to a footnote in a monster's biography. The psychological profile suggests deep insecurity and a desperate need for validation. Reenactment. Alternative history, Eva survives. Narrator. In our fictional scenario, Eva survives. A loyal aide, fearing the consequences of leaving her body for the Soviets, smuggles her unconscious form through the underground tunnels. She awakens 3 days later in a farmhouse outside Munich, her identity concealed, her past a nightmare she cannot escape. Interview segments with actors portraying Eva in hiding, 1946 to 1950. Eva, 1946. Terrified. They told me everyone thinks I'm dead. They gave me papers. Elsa Brenner, a war widow. But how do you live when you've died? How do you breathe when the air itself is thick with guilt? Psychologist Dr. James Rothman, interview. Survivors of proximity to extreme evil often experience what we call moral injury. They didn't commit atrocities themselves, but their association creates unbearable psychological weight. Many never recover. Reenactment, Eva working in a textile factory, 1948. Narrator. Our Eva takes work in a textile factory. She keeps to herself, never speaks of the past. At night, she writes letters she can never send, to her sister Gretel, to her parents, to the version of herself that died in that bunker. Montage. Eva's isolated life through the 1950s. Eva, VO, reading from diary. I dream of photography. The camera sees only what is there, truth without judgment, but I can never hold a camera again. My hands shake whenever I try. They remember what these eyes have seen. Interview, former textile worker, elderly woman. Factory worker. There was a woman, very quiet, always alone. We called her the ghost. She never smiled, never joined us for meals. One day in 1952, she simply didn't come to work. We found her room empty, except for a photograph, a woman on a mountain, laughing. We never knew who she was. Narrator. In our fictional account, Eva Braun disappeared completely in 1952. Some reports placed her in a convent in Bavaria. Others claimed she had taken her own life. The truth, like so much of her existence, remained hidden in shadow. Act 2. The Earlier Women. Segment 2. Gaily Raubel, the niece. Vienna, 1931, dramatic reconstruction. Narrator. Before Eva, there was Gaily Raubel, Hitler's half-niece. A young woman whose life ended mysteriously in 1931. History records her death as suicide, but the circumstances have always been shrouded in darkness. In our fictional exploration, we ask, what if she survived that night? A reenactment, Gaily in Hitler's Munich apartment, September 18th, 1931. Gaily, actress, desperate. I can't breathe in this cage. He watches everything, where I go, who I speak to. He's my uncle, but he looks at me like, I can't even say it. Sound of a gunshot screen goes black. Narrator. History says she died that night, but in our alternative narrative, the shot missed. A housekeeper, horrified by what she witnessed, helped Gaily escape to Austria. Interview. Historian specializing in the period. Historian Dr. Klaus Faber. Gaily Raubel's death was convenient for Hitler's political trajectory. Questions about their relationship could have destroyed him in 1931. If she had lived, if she had spoken. Reenactment, Gaily in Vienna, 1932, changed identity, Gaily Maria, under assumed name. They call me Maria now. I teach music to children. Sometimes a student will ask about my accent, or why I never speak of my family. I tell them I'm an orphan. In a way, I am. The girl I was died in that apartment. Montage, Gailey's life through the 1930s and 1940s. Narrator, our Gailey watches from Austria as her uncle rises to power. She reads the newspapers with trembling hands, sees his face everywhere. When the Anschluss comes in 1938, she flees to Switzerland, then to Argentina. Interview, actor portraying Gailey in old age, 1970s. Gailey, elderly, I carried 2 secrets to my grave. No, 3. First, that I was Gailey Raubal. Second, what he was truly like before the world knew. And third, that I was glad I escaped, even though survival meant living with the knowledge that I never warned anyone. Could I have stopped it? Could one word from me have changed history? These questions are my prison. Psychiatrist Dr. Elena Vasquez. Interview. Survivor's guilt takes many forms. For someone who escaped a powerful abuser who went on to cause massive suffering, the psychological burden would be extraordinary. The question, could I have stopped this, becomes an inescapable torture. Segment 3. Maria Reiter the Shop Girl. Berchtesgaden, 1926. Reconstruction. Narrator, Maria Reiter was 16 when she met Hitler in 1926. He was 37. Their affair, passionate and destructive, ended when Hitler's political ambitions took priority. Maria attempted suicide. She survived, but her connection to Hitler would haunt her for decades. Reenactment, young Maria and Hitler walking in the mountains. Maria, young actress, he spoke of Wagner, of destiny, of how Germany would rise again. I was 16, I thought it was romance. Interview, actor portraying Maria in the 1980s. Maria, elderly. People ask me, what was he like? They want to know if I saw the monster, but that's not how it works. He was charming, attentive. That's what makes it so terrible. Evil doesn't announce itself. Narrator, in reality, Maria Reiter survived World War II and lived into the 1990s, giving occasional interviews. In our fictional extension, we explore the psychological cost of being Hitler's first love. Reenactment Maria, 1945, interviewed by American soldiers. American officer, did you know about the camps? Maria, shaking her head. I knew him as a young man with dreams. Not those dreams. Never those. Officer, but you stayed in contact? Maria, I married someone else. I tried to forget, but how do you forget that your first kiss was with that? Montage, Maria's life, 1945 to 1989. Narrator, our Maria lives quietly in Bavaria. She changes her name, dyes her hair, moves to small towns where no one asks questions. But the journalists always find her. The historians always track her down. Reenactment, 1970s interview with journalist. Journalist, Frau Reiter, what do you want people to know? Maria, that I was a child, that I didn't know, that I've paid for my ignorance every day since. Is that enough? It's never enough. Narrator, Maria Reiter, in our fictional account, dies in 1989, the year the Berlin Wall falls. Her diary, never published, contains one recurring phrase. I didn't know, I didn't know, I didn't know. Act 3, The Witnesses. Segment 4, Magda Goebbels, the True Believer. Narrator, Magda Goebbels wasn't Hitler's lover, but she was perhaps his most devoted female follower, the wife of propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. She was called the First Lady of the Third Reich. Her story ends in the bunker. She murdered her 6 children before taking her own life. But what drove a mother to such an act? Reenactment, Magda in her luxurious Berlin home, 1944. Magda, actress, cold and elegant. The Führer is Germany. Germany is the Führer. Without him, there is no Germany worth living in. My children deserve better than a world ruled by Bolsheviks and Jews. Child psychologist Dr. Sarah Manning. Interview. What Magda Goebbels did is almost incomprehensible. She didn't kill her children in panic or mercy. She killed them ideologically. She was so consumed by Nazi ideology that she saw her children as extensions of the Reich, not as individual human beings. Reenactment. April 1945, The Bunker. Narrator, in those final days, as Berlin fell, Magda had opportunities to save her children. She refused them all. In our fictional alternative, we explore what might have happened if someone had forced her children to safety. Dramatic scene. A young Wehrmacht officer confronts Magda. Officer, Frau Goebbels, I have transport. Let me take the children to Bavaria. Magda, they stay with me. They stay with the Führer. Officer, they're children, innocent children. Magda, there is no innocence anymore, only loyalty. Alternative scenario, children are smuggled out. Narrator, in our fictional scenario, a group of officers, horrified by Magda's intentions, drug her and smuggle the children out of Berlin. They wake up in a monastery in Switzerland, orphaned, traumatized, their mother dead by her own hand in the bunker. Interview, actor portraying Helga, the eldest daughter, in 1980s. Helga, adult, deeply scarred. My mother tried to kill me. That's my first clear memory. Her face above mine, and then nothing. I woke up in a strange place, and they told me I was no longer Helga Goebbels. They gave me a new name, a new history, but you can't outrun your blood. Narrator, the Goebbels children, in this alternative history, are raised in isolation, their identities concealed. They struggle with depression, addiction, the weight of a legacy they didn't choose. Two take their own lives before age 40, the others live in perpetual hiding. Psychologist Dr. Rothman, the children of Nazi leaders face a unique trauma. They must reconcile love for their parents with horror at their parents' actions. Many struggle with identity, morality, the question of inherited guilt. It's a burden that often proves fatal. Segment 5. Unity Mitford the Obsessed. Narrator, Unity Valkyrie Mitford. British aristocrat, Nazi enthusiast, obsessed with Hitler. She shot herself in the head when Britain declared war on Germany in 1939. She survived, but was brain damaged, dying in 1948. But what if her obsession had never turned violent? What if she had survived intact? Reenactment, Unity at Nazi rallies, 1936 to 1939. Unity, actress, fervent. He's not just a man, he's a force of history. England and Germany together could rule the world. Why can't people see? Interview, British historian. Historian, Dr. Pamela Jenkins. Unity, Mitford, was mentally unstable, certainly, but she was also a product of her class and time. Many British aristocrats admired Hitler before the war. Unity simply took that admiration to a pathological extreme. Reenactment, Munich, September 3, 1939. Narrator, when Britain declared war, Unity went to the English Garden in Munich and shot herself in the head. The bullet lodged in her brain, but didn't kill her. Hitler arranged for her to return to Britain, where she lived in a childlike state until her death in 1948. Alternative scenario, Unity without brain damage. Narrator, in our fictional version, imagine Unity had never pulled the trigger. Imagine she'd been trapped in Germany throughout the war, forced to witness the reality of the regime she'd worshipped. Reenactment, Unity 1943, witnessing deportations. Unity, actress, dawning horror. Where are they taking those people? Why are the children crying? I asked at the Reich Chancellery, but no one will tell me. Montage, Unity's growing awareness, 1943 to 1945. Narrator, our Unity begins to understand. The whispers about camps, the disappearances, the casual cruelty. The man she idolized reveals himself, piece by piece, as a monster. Reenactment, Unity after the war, 1946. Testifying, Unity, broken. I was a fool, a romantic, delusional fool. I thought I was witnessing greatness, but I was applauding evil. I have my sister's face, my family's name, but inside, I'm hollow. Everything I believed was a lie. Interview, actor portraying Unity in 1960s. Unity, middle-aged, haunted. I spend my days trying to make amends. I volunteer, I donate everything I have. But it's not enough. How many died while I cheered? How do you atone for that? You can't. You simply can't. Narrator, our fictional Unity lives until 1985, working in homeless shelters, refugee centers, always anonymous, always trying to balance scales that can never be balanced. She keeps one photograph, herself with Hitler, smiling. She looks at it every day as penance. Act 4, The Servants and Shadows. Segment 6, The Women Who Served. Narrator, beyond lovers and devotees, there were the women who simply worked. Secretaries, housekeepers, cooks. They weren't ideologues, they were employees, but proximity to evil doesn't require belief, only presence. Interview montage, actors portraying various staff members. Elderly, 1980s to 1990s. Secretary #1. I typed his correspondence. I never read it. Well, you couldn't help but read some. Orders. Directives. I told myself I was just a secretary. Everyone needs secretaries. Cook #2. I made his vegetarian meals. He was polite, always thanked me. It's strange, isn't it? A mass murderer who says please and thank you. Housekeeper #3. I cleaned his rooms at the Berghof once. I found a child's drawing he'd made. A little dog. I thought, how can someone who draws puppies be But he absolutely was. Narrator. After the war, these women faced Allied interrogations, public suspicion, private guilt. Many changed their names, moved far away, never spoke of their service. Reenactment 1945, Allied interrogation room. Interrogator. Did you know about the camps? Secretary. We heard rumors, but you don't ask questions in that world. Curiosity was dangerous. Interrogator. So you chose ignorance? Secretary. I chose survival. Is that a crime? Narrator. This is the central question. Where does complicity begin? The secretary who typed the orders didn't write them. The cook who fed the dictator didn't plan the invasions. The housekeeper who made his bed didn't authorize genocide. But they all played a part, however small, in the functioning of the machine. Interview. Ethics Professor. Professor Dr. Anna Klein. We want clear moral categories, perpetrators and victims, good and evil, but history is messier. There's a vast middle ground of people who weren't heroes but weren't villains either. They were cowards perhaps, or pragmatists, or simply people trying to survive. How we judge them says as much about us as about them. Montage. Post-war lives of servants. Narrator. Our servants scatter across Germany, Austria, South America. Some marry and never tell their husbands about their past. Others are outed by neighbors and forced to move repeatedly. A few commit suicide, unable to live with what they witnessed and didn't stop. Segment 7. The Children of the Women. Narrator. The women we've explored, real and imagined, didn't just carry their own trauma, they passed it down. Interview. Actors portraying children of these women, 1990s to 2000s. Daughter of Eva, fictional. I didn't learn until I was 30 that my mother was her. She'd told me my father died in the war. She never said which side he fought for. When I found out, I felt like my entire life was a lie. Who am I? The daughter of a victim or a villain? Son of Gailey, fictional. My mother never spoke about him, but sometimes she'd stare at newspapers with his photo, and I'd see terror in her eyes. After she died, I found letters she'd written but never sent, accusations, rage, grief. She spent 50 years silent, and her silence poisoned everything. Narrator. Trauma doesn't end with the traumatized. It echoes through generations, shaping families in ways both visible and hidden. Interview. Transgenerational trauma specialist. Dr. Rachel Cohen. The children and grandchildren of both Holocaust survivors and Nazi perpetrators experience what we call transgenerational trauma. They inherit silence, shame, unprocessed grief. Many don't know their family's full story, but they feel its weight nonetheless. Reenactment Support Group 2000s. Narrator. In our fictional conclusion, we imagine a support group in modern Germany, children and grandchildren of people connected to the Nazi regime, gathering to break the silence. Woman 1. My grandmother was a secretary in the Reich Chancellery. She never talked about it. When she died, we found photographs. Her with Hitler, smiling. I didn't know whether to burn them or keep them as evidence of what? Her guilt? Her youth? Both? Man 1. My grandfather was SS. My father grew up with that shame, and he passed it to me. I've spent my life proving I'm different, but I'm exhausted. When does it end? Group leader. Perhaps it never ends completely. Perhaps that's the point. To remember, to prevent, to never forget that ordinary people can enable extraordinary evil. Act 5. Epilogue. The question of judgment. Final reflections. Montage. Modern Germany. Holocaust memorials. Stumbling stones. Narrator. We've explored fictional destinies for the women connected to Hitler, some real, some imagined, all symbolic of larger questions. What do we owe history? What do we owe victims? What do we owe ourselves? Interview. Holocaust survivor, elderly. Survivor. People ask me if I forgive. I don't forgive the perpetrators, never. But the women who stood by them, the secretaries, the girlfriends, the wives? I don't know. They weren't innocents, but they weren't architects either. Maybe judgment isn't mine to give. Interview. Granddaughter of Nazi officer. Granddaughter. I didn't choose my ancestry, but I choose what I do with it. I teach history. I work with refugee organizations. I try to honor the victims by preventing future genocides. Is it enough? No, but it's what I can do. Narrator. The women in Hitler's orbit, those who loved him, served him, or simply existed near him, faced impossible choices and impossible consequences. Some were true believers. Some were victims of his manipulation. Some were simply human beings caught in the machinery of evil. Interview. Final historian. Dr. Fisher. The lesson isn't that we should forgive complicity, it's that we should recognize how easily complicity happens. Every person in proximity to power faces moral tests. Most fail some of those tests. The question is, what will you do when you face yours? Closing montage. Faces of all the women discussed, fading into historical photographs. Narrator: Ava Brown, Gailey Raubel, Maria Reiter, Magda Goebbels, Unity Mitford, and countless unnamed others. Some died in the bunker, some survived and hid, some spoke and were ignored, some remained silent until death. History remembers the architects of evil, but it often forgets those who stood close enough to see and did nothing or couldn't do anything. Their stories remind us that evil requires not just villains, but also witnesses who look away, admirers who applaud, and ordinary people who prioritize survival over resistance. Final image: a stumbling stone memorial in Berlin. Narrator: the past is unchangeable, but the future, the moral choices we make when faced with rising hatred, authoritarianism, or injustice, that's ours to write. The women in Hitler's shadow teach us one final lesson: proximity to evil is a choice. What will you choose? Fade to black. End credits with dedication. For the victims, never again.